Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. Once again, it's time for the Q&As, so let's go ahead and knock this out. All right, first question. If I am on maintenance calories and go on a 200 to 300 calorie deficit while doing cardio 3 times a week on my off days, would I be able to recomp in a few months, assuming I have some body fat to spare? I eat 3,000 calories a day and do full body 3 times as well. And I'm making steady progress on my lifts. My choice of cardio would be playing an hour of basketball 3 times a week. Thanks, coach. Well, brother, first of all, if you listen to the wise expert Jerry Ward, he would tell you that basketball is not, in fact, cardio. Now, I'm going to disagree with him. I'm going to disagree with him there and say basketball's cardio. But just making sure that you understand there's a YouTube fitness disagreement about basketball being cardio. But yeah, I think it counts as cardio, personally. I guess it depends on how hard you ball, though. But over to your question. Well, yes, it's totally possible. The real question becomes how advanced you are versus how much body fat you have. So in other words, as far as gaining muscle while losing fat, there's a lot of factors involved. It has to do with how much muscle you already have. Obviously, the more muscle you have, the more difficult it is to gain more muscle. And that means including a nutritional environment and a calorie surplus that has to be factored in. That absolutely has to be factored in, and then the amount of body fat you have. In other words, there are people, depending upon their situation, an advanced lifter who's 10% body fat, for example. People would say, well, he has fat to spare. He's probably got 18, 20 pounds of body fat, right? That guy is probably going to lose muscle doing what you're doing. He won't recomp at all. He's probably going to lose muscle unless he somehow dials everything in absolutely perfect. Whereas someone who's morbidly obese and a novice is going to probably make normal noob gains doing what you're doing while losing weight, right? He's going to gain a pound or two of muscle every month while doing so. So here's what it comes down to. It depends upon all those factors: how much muscle you have, how advanced you are, the composition of your diet, how much body fat you have. In other words, the less muscle you have and the more novice you are, the easier it will be to pull this off. And conversely, the other end, it's harder. And the amount of body fat you have will determine it. Like with me, if I come in on my DEXA scan later this month and I have gained muscle, then it's largely because of the amount of body fat I had beforehand. And had I been at 12% body fat starting, I probably wouldn't have been able to pull that off. I probably wouldn't have gained any muscle. So again, there's all those factors that you have to factor in. So yes, it's possible, but the possibility of it is impacted tremendously by those other factors. So hopefully that makes sense to you. All right, next question. Hey Jason, when doing weighted chin-ups, it would be a good idea to use the same weight on the belt and using the same amount of sets and reps each time, but drive progressing using my slowly increased body weight as I'm eating in a surplus and gradually gaining weight. Would this be enough to drive overload, or should I still be looking to add volume and weight alongside this? Thanks. That's really context dependent. Just like the last one, it depends on how advanced you are. If you're an advanced lifter and you're gaining 2 or 3 pounds a month of body weight, that would be perfectly acceptable for progression on your chin-ups, right? That'd be perfectly acceptable. If you're a novice lifter, that's not going to be even close. That's not even going to be close, because you're not going to be gaining enough weight every week to see proper linear progression for a novice. So the question becomes, can you add more? If you are physically capable of adding more weight than what you're gaining in body weight, and you're capable of recovering from it from week to week, then you should add more than that. However, if you're reaching near your recovery limits and you're at least able to maintain your reps and sets, because I don't know how many you're doing, you might be doing a lot of volume, or you might be doing almost no volume. If you're doing a fair amount of volume and you're still recovering from it, but it's still challenging for it to keep pace with your body weight gains, and you're a late intermediate or advanced lifter, I would say it's perfectly acceptable. Keep it where it is. So again, this question, just like the first one, is very, very context dependent, and it's going to depend upon how you're recovering, how much total volume you're doing, and how advanced you are again. So again, to answer it, it's probably fine if you're doing a reasonable amount of volume every week and you're more advanced. It's probably not fine if you're closer to being a novice, that you need to be adding more than that to it. All right, next question. Good morning, coach. Pretty funny. I don't know if anyone catches that. They'll catch the good morning part. That's funny if you guys read the rest of the question. A couple weeks ago, I wrote in here asking about squat because my deadlift is so much stronger. You assumed that I had been doing low bar, but I had at that point never tried low bar. However, started to work in low bar and brought my max squat from 440 high bar to 495 low bar. So thank you for that. My question is, why does low bar get a bad rep as being hard on the lower back? I get way more lower back soreness and tightness from high bar than low bar. Thanks, coach. Because there's a lower back angle involved. Because low bar, by its very nature, in order to keep the bar mid-foot, requires you to have more total forward lean. So people assume that's more stress on the back. However, that is dependent upon your back angle. It's dependent upon your back angle and how far the bar is down, because what you need to remember when you're looking at the moment arm there, if the bar is further down the arm, like when you think of on a wrench or a jack or anything else, right? You think of a lever. The further it is down the lever, the less force and the less torque it's applying to your lower back at any given angle, right? However, what ends up happening, what you see is that some people do it in such a manner that they go lower than necessary because of where they place their shoulders and everything else. In other words, people who do this really upward face low bar to where they go with their lower back almost parallel with the floor, that's the people who hurt their back low barring. Realistically speaking, a proper low bar, when you have everything set properly, you should be able to have your upper back set in such a position to where you really don't go more than about 45 degrees from the floor most of the time. 45 degrees from the floor with your lower back. Your upper back it's not what you're worried about there. We're talking about putting torque on the lower back, which again, you're worried about shear stress at that point with the moment arms. So it's because some people do it wrong and they end up hurting their lower backs, but done correctly, as long as you keep the back angle reasonable. And again, that's all dictated by where you place the bar down your back and where the bar is relative to your feet. It actually is perfectly fine, and some people will actually see less stress, less cramping, less pump and everything in their lower back. And again, it just has to do with the angles they maintain, because if that person maintains a similar lower back angle high bar, right, but the bar is further up their back, then they're obviously going to see more lower back fatigue from that. So ultimately, it just comes down to all the moment arms involved. And it comes down to people's individual anatomy. So it's really complex as to why it gets a bad rap and why it hurts some people more than others. It has to do with what they're doing. It has to do with what they're doing wrong when performing the low bar. And we see examples of that. Dr. Lane Norton's a perfect example of a guy who got hurt repeatedly because he didn't properly pay attention to those things. All right, next question. Hey, Jason, thoughts on vegan nutrition with supplements if needed, like i.e. B12, vitamin D, etc., for optimal performance in the gym for strength, muscle gains, and health, and a comparison between these hypothetical optimal vegan diets you'd recommend and a well-balanced omnivore diet, assuming the same optimal physical training routine for strength and muscle, or both. Here's the problem. A vegan diet is never going to be optimal for strength, muscle gain, and performance. It's not going to be. So why are we talking about the word optimal combined with this? It isn't going to be optimal. And I'm not saying you can't make gains doing it. You certainly can. And here's the thing you need to remember. People will say, well, I know this vegan strength athlete or that one. It's like, but they didn't build their base vegan. They didn't build their base vegan. Now, I have no problem with someone being a vegetarian because they're getting dairy, and dairy is ultra high quality protein, has a very, very powerful impact on IGF-1 release in the muscle tissue and everything else. So that's a bit different. But ultimately, what it comes down to, it is never going to be optimal. It's like, I'm going to do something that's automatically unoptimal and then try to make an optimal version of it. That gets ridiculous. And what I would say to people, you're going to be swimming upriver, and people will say, well, it's my choice to make. It's like, no, that's why I don't work with people like vegans. That's why I don't work with people who have keto diets. In other words, if I ever go into coaching, I'm not going to work with people like that. I'm going to fire them, because I'm not willing to work with people who aren't willing to eat what they need to eat to get the results they want. And I just don't care at a certain point about what their personal beliefs are. And that's fine. You're allowed to have those personal beliefs. But I would never put my reputation on the line of coaching someone who chooses to do that and then they get suboptimal results. So I really don't give advice to people for the most part on that, other than I'm going to say if that's the lifestyle choice you make, then, do the best that you can, get your training on point, and hopefully everything balances out. But simply put, expect to get less progress from your training as a result of doing something inherently suboptimal because of your personal worldview. In other words, you can't serve two masters. Pick one. Which one's more important to you? And I know people don't want to hear that answer, but that's just how I feel about it. All right, next question. Hey, Jason, I'm an early intermediate. I squat 150 kilograms, bench 105 kilograms, deadlift 190 kilograms, and overhead press 65 kg, all for a couple of good solid reps. I want to run Madcow's 5x5 to kick my big four on, but I also want to make sure I put on size on particularly my upper body. Overhead press and bench is clearly a really weak lift for me, and Madcow only has you overhead press once per week. Is this enough frequency and volume for my overhead press to really improve? Can I also still run weighted chin-ups alongside it, as well as my arms are a weak point that I want to keep working on and build up? Thanks. I don't think that your pressing is actually behind your other lifts. They're not your weak points. You look pretty balanced overall. I think we could argue that maybe you want to add another 3 to 5 kilograms on your overhead press to be balanced with your bench, right? That's about it. And that would put it on balance with it. So you're not even far off on that. But your bench versus squat versus deadlift are perfectly reasonably balanced for your level. Now, as far as adding the others go, yeah, just add them in as accessories. If you want to add in some additional volume on the overhead press and chin-ups every day, that's fine. Because I think Madcow's really only has you do around 3 big lifts every day, and that's 3 days a week. If you want to work in additional back off work on the overhead press and the chin up 3 days a week as your accessory work on a program like that, I think that's fine. That's what accessory work is for. It's there to add in and work on your weak points. That's the whole concept behind it. And those are fantastic lifts that put a lot of muscle on you. They're useful, functional, beneficial lifts. So by all means, just add them in at the end of the workouts in reasonable volumes that kind of goes with a similar rep and set scheme to what you're doing that day already, so that it flows with the program properly as far as your stress recovery adaptation cycle. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time in part 2.